there was a time where I remember just me thinking, where do I am going? What's going on with my life? What do I want? It was like all the adrenaline gone, and now is the time to reflect. What do I want to achieve? Where I'm going? And I remember telling myself, well, you can take a ticket back and go home, but you might regret it for the rest of your life because you didn't fight for your dream. And I said, this, I'm going to give it all and I'm not going back to Mexico until I'm a world champion.
Many consider Sergio Perez to be the most underrated driver on the current Formula 1 grid. The Mexican seat at Racing Point has recently come under threat from four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel. With the team set to be rebranded as Aston Martin next year, Sebastian is the perfect driver to have as the face of the new brand due to his status in the sport. As of recording, a decision has not been made, but I expect that Racing Point will sign Seb for 2021 to replace Sergio Perez. Now, many would argue Sergio deserves the seat more than Sebastian, but at the end of the day, he doesn't get the final say. Sergio's talent and skill deserves to be utilised in one of the top 3 teams, but the trajectory of his career plummeted after the dismal years at McLaren in 2013. Since then, we have seen nothing but brilliance from him in Force India and now branded Racing Point, where he has only been beaten by his teammates once since the turbo hybrid era began back in 2014. It would be sad to see him leave Formula 1, as I think he's one of the unsung heroes of this sport. His journey to the pinnacle of motorsports has been anything but easy. As a 15-year-old, some incredibly tough decisions had to be made independently for him to get to where he is today. So ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and let's take a trip down memory lane through the Sergio Perez story. But before we get into it, I just wanted to remind everyone to drop a like on this video and consider subscribing to my channel with notifications turned on to get my latest driver stories in the future. Also, I would like to reference one of the main sources of information for this video, which is the official F1 podcast Beyond the Grid, so I'd go check that out after this video is over as well. I'm also on Twitter at BMPHF1, so you can follow me on there too, but without further ado, let's get into it. Checo was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, and is the youngest of Antonio Perez Garibay and Marilu Perez. At just 6 years old, he began his karting career in 1996. In his first year, he took 4 wins and finished second in the championship. The following year, he finished 4th in the karting youth class championship as the youngest driver in the category with a win and 5 podiums to his name. In 1998, he returned to the junior category and finished the season with 8 wins to become the youngest driver to win the championship at just 8 years old. In 1999, he was given special permission from the federation governing the Shifter Kart Championships to participate in the Shifter ATCC Championship, taking 3 wins and finishing 3rd in the standings. In 2000, he competed in the same championship again and also participated in the Shifter 125cc category, which was part of the Escuderia Telmex Challenge. But he wasn't satisfied with the results at those races, so he was given a special license to compete in the championship in 2001, and he beat drivers more than double his age. In 2002, Sergio attended his first Formula 1 Grand Prix after winning the Montoya karting competition and was awarded 2 tickets to the race in Indianapolis. This experience was like no other for Sergio, and he quickly decided that he wanted to become a Formula 1 driver. However, before Sergio, there were only 4 Mexicans who raced in Formula 1, as it's not as big in Mexico as it is in Europe. Therefore, Sergio knew he would have to break huge boundaries to make his way through the ranks into Formula 1. Moving on to 2003, he was leading both championships in the 125cc category, but he was involved in a collision with another driver, which caused his license to be stripped from him for that race. This meant that he would lose the championship and the Escuderia Telmex membership prize for the winner. The experience was so horrible for Checo that he decided to quit racing altogether. But one day after coming back from school, Checo's father received a phone call from Carlos Slim, who was offering Checo the opportunity to race again. Initially, he turned the offer down, but the director of Escuderia Telmex, Jimmy Morale, called his dad and told him that they were going to give Checo a chance in a test for the Skip Barber Championship, even if he didn't win the 125cc championship. So in that test, he was quicker than the champion from last season, and from there, his dream of becoming a Formula 1 driver was starting to look like a reality. In a whirlwind of emotions, Checo started to vision his path to Formula 1. His initial thought was to go to Europe, as there were infinitely more opportunities than there were in Mexico. So he spoke to Carlos Slim about it, but he said they didn't have any money. As a result, he raced in the Skip Barber National Championship in 2004 to get some experience in the US and finished 11th in the championship. But he was still obsessed with going to Europe, as he knew it would provide the best opportunity for a seat in Formula 1. So he called many European teams very early in the morning looking for cheap deals that he could get, and managed to find the cheapest deal in Formula BMW in Germany. So he booked his ticket, packed his bags, and took a 6-hour journey from Guadalajara to Toluca, where he would be flying from. His parents dropped him off at the airport, and he was left alone to make his way to Germany. Now, I don't know about you, but leaving your home, your family, and your friends to move to a completely different continent with no certainty of going back at just 14 years old is astonishing, and goes to show how strong-willed, independent, and self-determined Checo was at such a young age, and is one of the reasons why he's so successful today. When he arrived in Germany, a friend of his picked him up at the airport and took him to a motel in the middle of nowhere. He was dropped off there, and that was his accommodation for a short while. But at the time, the team owner was building a restaurant, and Checo decided that he wanted to reside there for the next 4 months. He spent most days alone and with nobody to talk to. Imagine going from living a normal life, going to school with friends, and seeing your family every day, to being stuck in the middle of nowhere in a country that you don't even speak the language of, and not having any of your friends or family with you. The circumstances were brutal. Nobody gave him anything, but it was Checo's determination and no excuses mindset that saw him through those tough 2 years. In Formula BMW, he finished 14th in 2005 and improved to 6th in 2006. In 2007, he relocated his personal residence to Oxford and switched to the British Formula 3 Championship. He competed in the national class with the T-Sport team, dominating the season by winning 2/3 of the races and taking a similar proportion of pole positions, as well as finishing all but 2 races on the podium to comfortably seal the championship. In 2008, he and T-Sport graduated to the premier international class of British Formula 3, and he finished 4th in the driver's standings. He moved up to GP2 racing for the Campos Grand Prix team in the 2008 Asia Series alongside Vitaly Petrov. In his first race at Sakir, Sergio led from lights to flag and won the sprint race, having started from pole position. He then added a second win at Losail during the sprint race of the night meeting in Qatar. He was then promoted to Arden International for the 2009 GP2 Series, finishing 12th overall in the standings, and the following year he won 5 races and finished 2nd in the championship behind the one and only Pastor Maldonado. Carlos Slim worked extremely hard to get Sergio a seat in Formula 1, and he managed to find a deal with Sauber. This was the perfect seat for Sergio, considering he was a part of the Ferrari Young Driver Academy, and racing at Sauber in his first year would set him up perfectly for an opportunity at Ferrari in the future. His debut race in Australia was impressive, to say the least, as he finished 7th place by managing his tyres incredibly well and was one of the only drivers to stop only once. But unfortunately, both cars were disqualified for infringing the technical regulations. His next point score came in Spain, where he took 9th place and finished ahead of his teammate Komimi Kobayashi. But during Q3 for the Monaco Grand Prix qualifying session, he had a huge crash at the Nouvelle chicane. Thankfully, he was conscious and able to talk after the incident, but he had suffered a sprained thigh and a concussion, so he didn't take part in the race. At the British Grand Prix, he took home the best result of his career, finishing 7th place. 2012 proved to be a much better year for Checo, as he beat his teammates in the championship, this time including 2 second places in Malaysia and Italy and a 3rd place in Canada. After an incredible season in 2012, Checo went to Maranello to discuss his future with Stefano Domenicali. During the meeting, he was offered a pre-contract to race for Ferrari in 2014, so all he had to do was drive for Sauber for another season. But Checo was young and eager to get himself in the top car so he could win the championship. At the time, he was privileged enough to have Ferrari and McLaren interested in him, and as McLaren had been winning races and fighting for titles, it seemed like the best place for him to be. So he decided to cut ties with the Ferrari Driver Academy and joined McLaren in 2013. Now, as most of you probably know, this was by far Sergio's lowest point in his F1 career. With McLaren being the 6th fastest car on the grid that year, Jensen and Checo were left fighting for points in the midfield, and neither of them scored a single podium. Checo's confidence also took a knock during that season, and he was heavily criticised for his overly aggressive manoeuvres, especially on his teammates. The first instance of this occurred at the Bahrain Grand Prix, where he started 12th on the grid but moved up to 6th, including some fierce wheel-to-wheel battles with Button. After the race, Jensen had this to say about Sergio's driving style. "I've raced with many teammates over the years, and with quite an aggressive teammate in Lewis. But I'm not used to driving down the straight and then my teammates coming along and wiggling his wheels at me and banging wheels with me at 300 kilometers an hour. I've had some tough fights in Formula 1, but not quite as dirty as that. That's something you do in karting, and normally you grow out of it, but that's obviously not the case with Checo. Soon, something serious will happen, so he has to calm down. He's extremely quick and he did a great job today, but some of it is unnecessary and an issue when you're doing those kinds of speeds." The tension between the two only intensified as the season went on, as they came very close again in Monaco, where Checo once again performed several aggressive overtakes before colliding with Raikkonen and eventually retiring. He did manage to hustle his car to a very strong P5 at the Indian Grand Prix and eventually finished 11th in the championship, 24 points behind his teammates in the standings. But McLaren made a very late decision to sack Sergio after the season, even though he was under the impression that they were going to extend his contract. This put him in a very difficult situation for his future in the sport, and he questioned whether that would be his last season in Formula 1. But exactly 1 month later, it was confirmed that he had signed with Force India, and unlike the McLaren contract, this one couldn't have come at a better time. With new engine regulations being introduced to the Formula 1 cars in 2014, Mercedes absolutely nailed it when it came to their engine development, and as a result, any team powered by them would have a significant advantage over most other teams, even if their chassis wasn't great. This helped Sergio to score a podium in just his 3rd race with the team in Bahrain after holding off a charging Daniel Ricciardo towards the end of the race. Another podium came in 2015 at the Russian Grand Prix, where he was running up in 3rd place at one point before Bottas and Raikkonen overtook him. But then, this happened. At the Monaco Grand Prix in 2016, Sergio went from 8th to 3rd, and for the European Grand Prix, he qualified 2nd but was handed a 5-place grid penalty for an unscheduled gearbox change. Nevertheless, he still managed to fight back to 3rd place, only behind Sebastian Vettel and Nico Rosberg. Then came 2017, the year where the new aero-focused regulations were implemented onto the cars to not only improve the cornering speeds, but also to reduce the deficit other teams had to Mercedes due to their superior engine. Therefore, Ferrari and Red Bull were brought much closer to Mercedes, which demoted Force India to the 4th best team. As a result, Checo didn't manage to finish on the podium in any of the races, but he did finish higher in the championship than his new teammate Esteban Ocon, and was best of the rest in that year as well. And the last race I want to talk about before we wrap up this video is the 2018 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Starting P8 behind his teammate, Sergio got off to a mediocre start, but was poorly positioned right in the thick of the drama in the midfield and suffered damage to his front wing. As a result, he came in to change it and came back out in P15. He impressively made his way back up to P7, but it was looking unlikely that he would finish any higher as Kimi Räikkönen was over 11 seconds up the road. Then on lap 40, Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen infamously collided at the end of the long straight, coming down towards turn 1. Unsurprisingly, the safety car was brought out, and while Grosjean was doing this, Sergio found himself sitting pretty in 5th place. Then the next sequence of events was some of the craziest we've seen in Formula 1 history. The safety car comes into the pits. Valtteri Bottas gets the jump on the rest of the field, but the Ferrari straight line speed powers Vettel right onto the gearbox of the Mercedes. He makes a late lunge down the inside, locking up his left front tyre and running deep into the corner, allowing Bottas, Hamilton and his teammate Raikkonen past him. Then 1 lap later, Checo crucially overtakes Sebastian to move up into 4th place. Valtteri Bottas is out in the lead with 3 laps to go, and then he runs over some debris, giving him a puncture and ending his race for good. And after all that, Checo emerges in P3 to score his final podium to date. Will we see him on the podium again soon? Well, with the car that Racing Point have this year, I'm confident that he will. Along with all the other tracks on the calendar, F1 needs to add the Mexican Grand Prix to host late in the season so we could potentially see Sergio Perez take a podium in front of his home fans. As I said, Sergio's journey has been incredibly difficult. Through thick and thin, Sergio has never backed down from the challenges and setbacks in his career, and even if he may not win a world championship as he well could have done, he will still go down as one of the most talented drivers in Formula 1. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you're new to get the latest driver stories in the future. Comment your thoughts on Sergio's journey to Formula 1 in the comment section below and let me know which driver stories you want me to do next. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.